What's up, Internet? This is Rambling Josh, and today I want to talk about a game that I've been playing a lot of recently that I think is pretty good. And I guess the point of this video is to encourage other people to try it out as well, because I think people should play good video games. The game specifically that we're talking about is this one here, which goes by the name of Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. Which is an idle game or an incremental game or whatever you want to call it. Although I don't think I would call it a clicker game. A lot of people use the term clicker. I don't think this game really falls into that category. But I guess part of the challenge of this video is that there's a lot of kind of implicit biases against clicker games. They're kind of typically conceived as being, or perceived rather, as being not very complex, not very interesting, just kind of why would you spend your time doing it? So I figure I'll back up a little bit. Before we look at the game too much, let's take a look very briefly at my history with incremental games. Because I've been into these type of games for a long time. Clicker games tend to really hit a lot of the things that I want a game to accomplish, basically. They let me, play strategically without having like a very large level requirement. Like, it doesn't take a lot of effort to do. You just kind of figure out some mechanics, make some good choices, and just watch the bars fill up, and you achieve long-term goals, and you just always progressing. And to me, it's always been very interesting to kind of set up something so that it's progressing for you while you're not actively interacting with the game. I think that's a really interesting mechanic in games. I have for a long time. So a while ago, I wrote this post here on my website about various different games of this type that I played in the past. Basically just kind of trying to look at their strengths, their weaknesses, and just pull out any mechanics or qualities or whatever from these games that I think really is what sets them apart and what really makes them appeal to me. So that was the point of this exercise. So anyways, if we scroll down here, we'll see Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. So this is a game that I initially played, I want to say about 2 years ago, when it initially entered early access. And we'll look at this in a minute, but at the time I thought it was a fun game, but it kind of fell off for me pretty quickly. And what ended up happening was that a few months ago now, the game came out of early access. I decided I would give it a chance to look at it again, and I was very hooked on it, and I still am. So we're going to kind of look at where the game was in the past, where it is now, and why I think it's such a good idle game. Because I think it accomplishes a lot of things that I've been looking for in idle games that these games never really hit. There's a level of depth in this game that other idle games have never really felt like they accomplished, at least from what I've seen. I think Idle Champions does a really good job of delivering that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So what is Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realm? The first thing I say is the name is horrendous, which I don't know that I agree anymore. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's literally, this is literally a tie-in to the Forgotten Realms D&D property. If you know anything about D&D, the lore and the characters stretching way far back, you may recognize some of the faces here. This is a little bit bigger. So, we've got Jarlaxle, we've got Minsk, we've got Delana, and so on and so forth. Bruno here. All these are characters that if you're into D&D lore, you might recognize. If you don't recognize them, that's perfectly fine too. I did not recognize any of them when I started, and I still found this game very entertaining. I know who a lot of them are now, but this is after playing for months. And so now it's kind of like a side benefit that I think is kind of cool. So this game, horrendous name aside, is a really great example of the Clicker Heroes formula being brought to a much more appealing conclusion. You can kind of see, where is Clicker Heroes here? It's got a kind of similar, this is not a great screenshot, but a kind of similar idea where, you've got enemies on the right, heroes on the left, You're just kind of trying to beat up the enemies on the right before things go wrong. So in the example of idle champions here, enemies just kind of slowly stream in from the left. Our champions are on the left, or enemies stream in from the right. Our champions are on the left. They just kind of do their thing automatically, and hopefully you win. You can, of course, as well do a whole bunch of clicking. Clicking is pretty powerful at the start, but one of the things I like about this game is you learn pretty quickly that clicking is actually not very useful, like, no matter what level you're at. Idle Champions is like 90%, 95%, like, just pure strategy. The actual, like, physical, like, not mechanical, but, like, the requirement for actually playing this game is very low. Pretty quickly you start unlocking familiars, which you can use to kind of, you can put them down here, and these guys are all going to click for me. So even the need to actually physically click is something that goes away. But once you complete your quest, you can kind of move on to the next area. And there's kind of like an overarching narrative throughout each kind of wave. The idea here is that you're kind of like going on a journey, and each wave is like a step in that journey. It's a little journal here. You can see the characters like talking to each other. Normally these text boxes would come up automatically. I have that turned off just because it gets in the way and it gets annoying after a little bit of a period of time. But if you're into that, you know, there's an actual story behind these missions. That's pretty cool. Let's go back to Idle Champions. You can recruit a number of different heroes for your party, and each has their own abilities and strengths. I say as many of 9 of them. That's not true anymore. It used to be. Can be placed on your grid. So we can see that there's all these slots that we can place our characters, and we can move that around, and that becomes important later. But you might notice that this grid has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 slots. Plus it's a very different formation than what we see in this screenshot here. Here you can see they're kind of arranged in like a diamond shape. And this is obviously a very different shape. And who goes where matters a lot. Most champions have abilities which will affect the performance of their nearby allies. One also has to worry about how much damage is coming in from enemies, and so the concept of tanks and healers exists here as well. I think what really pushes this game over, however, that's not a very well phrased sentence, the idea that players can participate in a number of different adventures. Each one has its own little quirk. It will influence how you put your party together. Maybe there's lots of beasts. Maybe there's obstacles, restricting how many champions you can use, so on and so forth. So there's, in addition to just kind of building a formation of characters here, that we can kind of unlock characters by like purchasing them on the bottom. So in addition to just kind of filling out your formation, you have to worry about, well, like where they go. And there are different adventures available that will put like restrictions on your party, so it becomes kind of like a puzzle. Like, given the restrictions in place, how do you complete the adventure at hand? We'll just turn auto progress on here so that our guys can keep on going. And go back to this. So there's lots of customization in your team, lots of variety in solving all the little puzzles. It's pretty easy to understand. I don't know if I would agree with that anymore. I think the default level of gameplay is very understandable, but there's a lot of depth to this game, and things that you just don't realize until you play for a while, even interact with the community. The community of this game is really good. The developers, Codename Entertainment, are really good at interacting with the community. They do a Q&A every week on Reddit. They do a Q&A stream every week, and they have various other community streams throughout the week where they have like prominent members of the community talk about like upcoming new adventures, new features, new champions, all this kind of stuff. It's just a really entertaining community to be a part of as well. If we look at weaknesses, clicking eventually becomes a fruitless endeavor. This is kind of like the newbie talking. It turns out we don't really care about clicking. This is basically a straight idle game, which is fine. These last 2 points here kind of sum up the difference, I think, between the early access portion of the game and the currently live portion of the game. Basically, I felt early on that there wasn't a lot of depth to the game. There wasn't a lot of things to do. There was not very much meta progression, all this kind of stuff. But the game has managed to kind of take those weaknesses and turn them into one of its greatest strengths. But we'll get to that in a minute. I think that's enough of this article. Let's go back to the game. So the whole point of the game here is, let's take our familiars off for now so we can kind of focus on what our champions are doing. The base idea is that each of your champions kind of do a different thing, and you want to kind of be very careful about where you place them in their formation to kind of optimize your party, so to speak, so that they have the best possible performance. So the way it works is that each character has, you have to purchase them to unlock them, but then they also have, as you level them up, they learn new abilities. So right now they're just kind of like meat sacks that can like attack, but for example, if I start leveling up Brunor, he learns a whole bunch of abilities. We just skipped past them and unlocked a bunch of stuff, because I can learn a whole bunch right away. Normally when you first start out, this would go much slower, but I've advanced a whole bunch. I've earned Favor, which you unlock just by earning gold. Favor increases your gold fund so that when you like reset, as you do in most of these games, you reset so that you can push further next time. It works a little bit differently in Idle Champions, but I'll get into that more in a little bit. But suffices to say that this is going faster than it normally would, like my unlocking of my characters and stuff like that. The actual like clearing of enemies could go a lot faster, but we'll look at that once we kind of understand the game a little bit better. So if we look at Brunor, we look at his upgrades, we can kind of see that he has a bunch of interesting stuff that he can do. Some of this stuff is just increasing his attack, but if we look at, for example, the main thing that Brunor does is he has his rally ability, which increases the damage of champions in the same column as him by a pretty big chunk. So we can see that if we hover over him, there's like a little green arrow pointing to Minsk here. That indicates that he is buffing Minsk. Similarly, if we do the same thing with Celeste, she learns Crusader's Mantle, and she also has a heal. So Crusader's Mantle lets her buff all champions adjacent to her. So we can see, like, if we move her around, it shows like these are the characters that are being buffed by Celeste. So if we put her, say, here, now we can see that Minsk is being buffed by both Brunor and Celeste. So similarly, if we level up Calliope a bunch, look at her, she has Bardic Inspiration, increases the damage of champions in the column in front of her by a pretty good chunk. She also gives temporary hit points to anybody within 2 slots of her. So we can see that Minsk is in the column in front of her, so she gets buffed by Calliope, and who is also giving temporary hit points to all of these people here. So that's kind of nice. Or she gives temporary hit points to them when they take damage. They're not taking damage right now, but if they were, they would be getting temporary hit points. So what happens when the enemies get to the front of your formation? Well, the characters in the front here are not super good at taking hits. If you look at Delena here, she only has 41 HP, which is pretty bad. I guess Brunor only has 98. But a character like Nayeli here, she has 189, and we haven't even leveled her up at all yet. So if we level her up a bunch, now she doesn't have much more HP, but Nayeli is a tank. We can see it says tanking here, and one of the other things is Overwhelm, which just means that she can handle more enemies attacking her at the same time. So basically we want Nayeli to be in the front. That allows her to be a tank, so that any enemies that do get to the front line, Nayeli can actually take a few hits. We have Celeste here, who is constantly healing the front row. We can see the little 16s. So now we've got a formation that's kind of like looking at our tanks and stuff as well. Nayeli herself has an ability called Aura of Vengeance? No, Courage. Aura of Courage, which buffs allies behind her as well. So she's technically buffing Celeste's damage, but we don't really care about Celeste's damage because she's a healer. So I'm kind of like rambling on and on and on about this, but like there's all these champions that do interesting things, and you want to try and arrange them in the right way to kind of like optimize those things. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. And it's really interesting that like every champion has like a very distinct personality. So you can kind of think of them as like they do like 2.5, I would say, on average, kind of like interesting things So they all, each kind of like bring something interesting to the formation. And as we keep going, there's actually 12 like slots of heroes we can unlock. So we can unlock Jamila here, and that shows us that the last slot we can unlock Arcan. And like they have their own interesting things that they can do. So this is we have 10 slots and 12 possible champions to put in it. So, we can try and achieve different things with our formation. So we can say like Arcan's a tank. We can't afford to unlock him right now because he's expensive. But we could say, maybe he should go here because this is like the tank line. And we have stuff like, maybe Jarlaxle is a better DPS than Minsk. Well, that made the number go down, so maybe not. And we also start getting into things like, you probably saw these windows popping up where we get to choose a specialization for our characters. So if we look at Celeste, we can choose between War Domain and Life Domain. War Domain makes her buff to nearby allies more strong, but Life Domain lets her heal from farther away. So for example, if we were to put Celeste here, we can see it's only healing Brunor, and it's not healing our frontline tanks anymore. But if we were to choose Life Domain, now it's healing everyone in front of her. So you have to kind of make these choices between like what specialization is right for your characters and the role that they're serving in the current formation. And not all formations look like this either. This one in particular is actually kind of hard to try and make up a good formation for. But yeah, so you've got different specializations characters can go into. So like Calliope can increase her buff from Bardic Inspiration, or she can buff how frequently she's able to give out temporary hit points, stuff like that. So that's kind of like the first level. That's kind of like basically the game as it was when it came out in early access. One of the things that they've added as time has gone on is the ability to swap these characters out, basically. So for example, I guess before we get into examples too hard, one of the things that's kind of interesting about the way that Idle Champions works is that the kind of meta, so to speak, is that you only want one DPS in your formation at a time. So if we look at this, we can kind of bring up the DPS preview here. Actually, let's switch from scientific notation to like just raw numbers, so it's a little bit easier for people to understand. Hopefully, maybe that's not more easier to understand, but you can think of it as kind of like. Are you gonna update? This is still using the wrong numbers. So scientific notation is basically like the number on the end is how many like zeros you can think of as being after the number. So 1.57 E24 DPS means I'm doing like 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 DPS. That's how much DPS I'm doing. So, okay, I don't know why this is not working right now. These numbers are not... Okay, there it goes. There it updates. So, like, if we look at these, we can see, okay, Minsk is doing E23 damage, whereas Jarlaxle, who is also a DPS, is doing E17 damage. So Minsk is literally doing 10,000% or 10,000 times as much damage as Jarlaxle is doing right now. So, like, Jarlaxle isn't really doing anything useful in this formation because, like, every time that Minsk attacks, it's equivalent to 10,000 Jarlaxle attacks, which is insane. But if we were to, say, switch Jarlaxle out for someone else, then maybe we can make Minsk's DPS higher. So if we put Sentry in instead of Jarlaxle, because we can click this and choose between these characters, because I have all these characters unlocked. So Sentry is a more support-oriented character, and we can see that switching Sentry in has increased everyone's DPS, but also Minsk's. So we can say a similar thing for Delina as well. Delina is also a DPS, but she's only doing E22 damage. So she's only doing 100 times less damage than Minsk, but still, the same thing applies. But if we switch her out for, say, Hitch, we can see everyone's DPS goes up, and now Minsk is doing 10 times more damage as well. So the idea here is kind of like we want to basically have everyone buffing 1 DPS. And we kind of do that by increasing like how many champions we have unlocked, because unlocking more champions gives us more ability to kind of craft the optimal formation. So we can kind of start saying things like, oh, well, Nayeli is a tank, but she only buffs with the person behind, and whereas Sentry is also a tank, but she buffs everyone behind. She buffs everyone. So if Minsc is our DPS, Nayeli is not buffing Minsc from the back row, whereas Sentry in the front row is buffing our DPS. So if we switch out Nayeli for Spurt, say, Spurt buffs allies that are directly next to him, at least once you get him some abilities. So if we put him here, we can see, oh, he's buffing Minsc, and Celeste is buffing Minsc, and now Brunor is buffing Minsc. And hey, if we level up Hitch, his thing, if we look at him, Natural Performer, he increases the damage of everyone with 14 or more Charisma. Ooh, Minsc doesn't have 14 or more Charisma. Well, that kind of sucks. Who does have Charisma? Well, who does have Charisma? I guess Jarlaxle has Charisma. So we could say maybe Jarlaxle is a better choice for DPS than Minsc, because he can receive more buffs. Okay, well, Minsc is not a very good tank, so who do you want as a tank? Well, Nova's a tank. We can put her in as a tank. She's not an amazing tank, but she works. Oh, and Tyrell, he's not a tank right now, but if we level him up, we can give him Wild Shape. And as Wild Shape, he is a tank, and he buffs characters 2 rows behind him. At least when he levels up a little bit more. He doesn't have that right now. So we can kind of see he's buffing a bunch of people. So now we have Jarlaxle is doing a pretty decent amount of DPS. Well, I guess he's only doing 26. Well, we haven't leveled him up at all. So we have all these characters kind of buffing one character kind of idea. Ashar is kind of trash, so we're just going to ignore him. Let's actually switch in Shandy. So Shandy is interesting because she actually has an ability called Dash, which I should know it by now. I think you unlock it at 190? No. Oh, there it is, 120. So Dash actually makes the game run faster when your party hasn't been hit for a while. So once this timer counts down to 0, the game will actually start running faster. So that's the thing you can do too, is you have characters that we can choose the specialization that even increases her dash. So you also have characters that just kind of like speed up the game. So like, I don't know, it's just really interesting that there's all this depth to kind of putting together a party that works on a particular map. So like, if I was trying to build like a really sweet formation here, it would be a little bit hard right now, honestly, because my gold find is low enough that like I haven't even unlocked this last slot yet. But I would probably want to use Zorbu, which I can unlock him, but I can't afford to like level him up a bunch of times yet. But I would probably want to do Zorbu. Tyrell is a good tank for this. He buffs 2 slots behind him, but he also has a particular buff. Where is it? Is it Wild Inspiration? No. Forces of Good. He doesn't know yet, but Forces of Good gives him like an even bigger buff on champions who have good alignment. So Zorbu is Chaotic Good, so he would get that buff. So that's a good combo. And then I kind of like Sentry because, like I said, she buffs basically everyone in the formation. So she's good in this slot, in this scenario where our DPSs kind of can't go right behind, because like we could put our DPS here, but putting our DPS there means that Brunor can't be in the same column as him, so we want him there, kind of thing. So we could do that. Sentry, now her specialization, we can choose to... Sentry actually has a speed ability as well, where she has a chance of making this number smaller So instead of needing to kill 25 monsters to go to the next wave, maybe we need to kill 21 monsters. So that can help you get through the levels faster. So we get to choose between that or this thing, which makes her buff to other champions bigger. So we'll go with that for now. So we could do that. We could maybe say Calliope. Although in this formation, Calliope is not close enough to the front line to give any temporary HP to our tanks, so maybe we don't want to use Calliope. Maybe instead we switch to Queelik, who is very similar. He basically buffs characters that he's next to, so we can put him here, and he's still buffing Zorbu, but the other thing that he does is he has a heal where he can heal. He heals everybody in your party who has taken damage. So if these guys are taking damage, they're going to get healed by Queelik, which kind of makes up for the fact that they're not getting the temporary HP buff from Calliope. So you can do that. Spurt, he can either buff people who are 2 slots away from him, or he can increase the strength of his buff. This effect makes it stronger. This effect is stronger depending on how many kobolds you have in your party. But choosing this specialization will increase the power of his buff by 100%, even if there are no other kobolds in his party. I don't think I actually have any kobolds right now, other than Spurt. Do I? I don't think I do. Oh, what we can do as a demonstration, we'll just pick this right now. Because that's something, you kind of have to think of your formation as a whole as well, right? So we could do something like, Brunor has an ability, what's it called? Dwarven Glory. So we know that Brunor's main ability is Rally, which buffs champions in the same column as him. But Dwarven Glory makes Rally more powerful depending on how many dwarfs are in your formation. So if we were to do something like swap out Tyrell for Barrowin, Barrowin is a dwarf, so we can see that that would buff Rally. So if you look at Rally right now, it's buffing for 3.6 E4 is how much Rally is increasing the damage of champions in the same column as him right now. But if we take Barrowin out, put Tyrell back in, we can see that that's now only buffing for 9,000%, which would be this would be 9.6 EO3, whereas with Barrowin it's EO4. So we can see that that increases the strength of that buff, but like Barrowin as a character is not doing anything for the DPS because Barrowin can't hit from that slot. So like there's so many things to balance. There's just so much depth to this. So for example, as we're like putting together this formation, now we have a problem where Zorbu is a really strong DPS, but he only has 13 charisma, so he's not getting hit by this buff from Hitch. So we don't want to use Hitch. He's not really doing much for us right now. So who do we want to switch him out for? We have Makos here, who like he's not awful. But what we can do, we can switch Minsk out for, say, Caddy Bree. So Caddy Bree is kind of an interesting character, but we can see this number goes way up when we make that switch, right? So now we can see Zorbu's damage is up to E47. Imagine a 3 with 47 zeros after it. That's how much damage Zorbu is doing right now. And this is because we kind of switched our formation to focusing on being like a cohesive whole rather than just kind of like a mishmash, right? And this is something we achieved because we have a whole bunch of characters unlocked so that we can put together a really nice formation. This is a pretty good formation. Like, if we look at it, actually one thing we could do, let's do it. Let's switch in Dritz. And if we make Dritz our DPS, since we don't have enough favor and enough gold find to really upgrade Zorbu a whole lot right now, let's just switch in Dritz. Who is another character that you may or may not recognize. Who should we put in here? Because now Zorbu is like useless for us because he's just a DPS. Dritz does not have enough charisma to be buffed by Hitch. What can we do here? I guess we could always use Narak. Move Shandy around. Shandy buffs characters more depending on how many champions around her have high dex. So you want Shandy to be near high dex champions, who these three all are. Let's see. I guess we could use Avernus. Avernus is really good. So is it better like this or like this? I guess like this. So Avernus, we don't have enough gold right now to really upgrade him too far, but as we push farther into this this adventure, we would get enough to give him a decent amount. Okay. So this is pretty decent, because we actually have enough gold to get a decent amount of buffs on Dritz. So we can see that Dritz is now doing E50 damage, which is higher than Zorbu's E47 was, just because we happen to be in a place right now, like Zorbu is unquestionably a better DPS. We just don't happen to have enough favor right now to really get the good upgrades on him to really make him worth using. But the other thing that we have going for us right now is if we look at Dritz, actually let's look at someone else first. If we look at Brunar, he has this affiliation called Companions of the Hall, which is Brunar, Cadbury, Dritz, Regis, and Wolfgar. So he has... Actually, he might not have it yet. I think he unlocks it at level 1000. So maybe we're a little bit far back yet. But basically, these characters all have abilities that like buff other members of the Companions of the Hall. So I might have the one for Cadbury yet. Yeah, so Cadbury increases the bounty of the Hall by 100%, and if all enemies on the screen are marked, enemies take 100% more damage per Companion of the Hall in the formation. So that means that her marked for death buff is more powerful right now because Dritz is in here and because Brunar is in here. And hey, we can also say, oh, let's switch out Celeste for Regis. We say he buffs people behind him because Dritz is behind him. Dritz does melee damage, so we want our enemies to be have a ruby weakness to melee, so that just increases how much melee damage they take. And wow, now we're up to E52 damage because we have so many people from the Companions of the Hall, and we can continue to do this. Like Brunar's going to learn some stuff that interacts with Companions of the Hall. Dritz is going to learn some stuff that interacts with the Companions of the Hall. We can see it right here. Increase the bounty of the Hall, and does 400% more damage for each member of the Companions of the Hall in the formation. So once he learns that, because there's 4 Companions of the Hall right now, he's going to do 1200% more damage, which he's the DPS, so we want him doing all the damage. Brunar, can we see his? He unlocks his at level 1000. But the idea is like they all work together, right? And also, because all 4 of them are here, we have a pretty decent gold find. Like if we get rid of Regis for a second, you can see the gold find goes down a little bit. Down by about half, actually. So yeah, this is just one example of like a way you can put together a formation. But like, if that on its own wasn't interesting, I haven't even touched on like the meta progression elements of this game yet, which I said at the very start is kind of like a part of where this game really steps it up. Because like most idle games, what happen is like you get as far as you can, and then you say, oh well, this is as far as I can go. I'm going to complete this adventure, I'm going to reset, and I'm going to start over again from the beginning, and I should be able to push even further, right? So we could do that. We could say, this is what we were doing. Now we're at the start again with just Brunar. We want to like kill these guys, and we can like unlock our guys again. We have slightly more favor than we did last time, so we can kind of like unlock things a little bit faster and just push even further. But just cancel out of that real quick. This is only one part of the game that I'm doing right now. Every part of the game kind of looks like what I just did, but what is this? So this is a time gate that I'm doing right now. So this isn't even part of the main game. This is like a special side activity that I'm doing. These unlock for free every 2 weeks, I believe. And specifically I was doing this to unlock this character here, Turiel. I didn't have that character. Time gates let you unlock characters, so I chose to unlock Turiel, and now I'm like pretty much done with that. I've done this. I've done these three like special variant missions, and I was just doing this free play. So let's close this time gate. We're done with this. Now, if we look at the main game, the way the main game works is we have like these points on the map, and basically they're grouped into these like missions. So escort to Waterdeep is a mission. If we were to select this, we kind of like start. We just start a mission like normal. Just ignore this for the moment. And like this is a completely different mission than what we were looking at initially, right? We can see that this has a different formation. This is where the diamond that we were looking at earlier comes from. So this is a completely different shape. This only has 9 champions instead of 10. We're fighting these humanoids instead of whatever we were fighting before. It's like a completely different scenario. So because we have like a different number of champions, we have a different like shape of the grid. We have like completely different considerations for like what we want to do, how to build a good formation in this. But what we could do, or what we can do on top of that, is that was it this one? Escort to Waterdeep also has these 3 variants that are available, and each variant has its own conditions. So I've done all these variants before. Let's find a variant I haven't done yet. A lot of these are pretty hard, actually. Yeah, actually no, let's not look at this one. Maybe jump over to Barovia, which you may recognize as the Curse of Strahd. So this whole like screen of challenges are all like a tie-in to the Curse of Strahd campaign. This is literally called Visions of Strahd. So I'm trying to look for one with an interesting. All champions take damage over time based on their con score. That's kind of interesting. Only one of each race is allowed in your formation at a time. Champions in seat 1 to 4 are unavailable. Relentless undead monsters spawn and attack your formation. When they are killed, they don't disappear. Instead, after 3 seconds, they get back up. Only champions with a strength score of 12 or higher may be used. Let's take a look at this one. So that's like another layer on top of it that you have to consider, right? We can see there's this little symbol over top of Regis because he only has 8 strength. So he does not have enough strength to come into this thing. So we have to use someone else instead. We can't use Regis as a buffer. We can't use Regis as a healer. So maybe we use Korth instead. Of course, we have 12 slots of characters to pull from. So like there's a lot of like mixing and matching of like, okay, we have these roles that we need to fulfill. We want 1 tank, at least 1 healer, at least we want 1 DPS, and that leaves us 6 buffers. So like, how do we get that together in the optimal formation using these 12 slots, knowing that certain characters can't be used? We can't use Dritz as our DPS in this one. We can't use Zorbu as our DPS in this one. So maybe we use Jamila. Maybe we build our formation around Jamila. So there's that whole thing you can do. But then even this is only one part of it, because on top of a Grand Tour of Sword Coast, we also have another map for Tomb of Annihilation. Annihilation? Annihilation. We also have I can't talk. We also have Waterdeep Dragon Heist with its own set of things, with its own events, with its own variants, with its own formation. So if we start up a Waterdeep adventure, we can see this one, we've got these 3 guys randomly in here, so that's going to screw with our formation. And like, we've got a completely different grid that we're working with here, right? We've got 2... The fuck is this? What did I just do? I don't know what that was, but we're just going to ignore that. So like, we've got 2 slots in the middle, we've got 3 slots directly behind it, so like maybe this is good for Brunor because he can buff 2 slots below him, kind of thing. So this is a completely different layout. So each campaign, you've got Sword Coast, you've got Tomb of Annihilation, you've got Waterdeep Dragon Heist, we've got Descent into Avernus. Each one of these has their own formation. You can see the formation looks like here as well. So that's kind of freaky as well. There's like a big giant hole in the middle of it. So each campaign has its own campaign progression with its own like narrative progression. It's got its own formation. It also has its own buffs. So if you look at this menu, the blessing menu, this is telling us what our favor level is for each campaign, basically. So Torm's favor is for Sword Coast, Kelmavor's favor for Tomb of Annihilation, Helm's favor for Waterdeep, Tiamat's favor for Avernus, and so on and so forth. So you can see that I've got different progression levels for each campaign. So that means that this is I have E22 favor for this, where I have E26 favor for Tomb of Annihilation. So that means that like my formation is gonna grow and get to like not get to quite as high levels in Avernus as it was if I was running a adventure within Kelmavor's favor, Tomb of Annihilation. And on top of that, you can use your favor to buy certain blessings. So if I have E22 Tiamat's favor, maybe, yeah, I can kind of afford to buy some of these, because these only cost E17, E18, right? But it gets to a point where it's saying, oh, purchasing this would be costing more than 1% of your total favor. You don't want to spend all your favor because you need your favor to give you gold find, but you can also spend your favor to purchase these upgrades. So we kind of purchase these until the warning comes up, and then, yeah. On top of that, these blessings on the left, these ones only apply to when you're doing a campaign in Avernus. You have stuff like a buff to good champions, every event champion in the formation. That's interesting. So any champion in Avernus, you get a slight buff for any champion who is like not they call them the evergreen champions. So like the default first character in each slot, basically. So these are all your evergreen champions. And anyone who you like switch into that slot, those are all like champions that would get a buff based on this particular blessing. But then you also have these ones on the right. These blessings are active no matter what campaign you're running. So no matter what campaign I'm running, I increase the amount of patron currency gained from free play by 10% overall campaigns. So there's like that meta progression. There's the fact that there's all these other blessings for events that happen periodically, where an event will give you even more. Anytime an event comes up, which usually events run for 2 weeks and they come up every 3 weeks, so 2 of every 3 weeks an event is running. We have an event just ended just recently. Let's see if we can. Yeah, sure. Let's take a look at this graphic, if we can get it on screen right. So this is kind of like a graphic that the community made up to kind of look at some of the champions. But on the side, we can see all of these. So these are all the events that go on. And this kind of shows you, you unlock characters in events. So like each event has 3 champions associated with it. So you can do certain things to unlock those champions. The events and the time gates, like I was in a time gate when I first started, those have their own separate progression. So like you're pretty frequently starting back from ground zero kind of thing. Not ground zero, but like the next event to happen is going to be Founders Day. So we're going to look at Deacon, Walnut, and whoever this character is. We don't know yet because Codename Entertainment hasn't told us. But we're going to go into that with 0 favor. So we're going to be able to look at these characters. There's 3 adventures. Each adventure has their own variants, so there's a few new variants. And then once that event goes away, that's when you can unlock. You can use the time gate to look at just one champion. So you can say like, oh, like I specifically want to get Turiel, so I did all Turiel's variants the same as if he was in an event, and yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't make a lot of sense just explaining it, but events are super cool and I like them a lot. And they give you a chance to kind of look at progression again from the beginning, from 0 favor. But even with that, even with 0 favor, you're still able to push pretty deep, just by nature of like your kind of like, I guess you could call it account level progression, because like you have more champions unlocked, so you can put together like overall more powerful formations, even if you have no gold find. But on top of that, each champion also has equipment. So equipment comes from chests. You can earn chests by completing stuff, by killing bosses, by... They give a lot of events out just as to the community on very frequently. So they do stuff like people. There's a bunch of like D&D streams of people just streaming D&D who they have tie-ins with idle champions, where they give out chest codes and stuff like that to like cross promote. So if we look at, for example, let's look at Brunar, our boy Brunar. He's got this level 42 shiny purple axe that increases the damage of all champions by 534%, just by nature of him having this axe. So as long as he is on the field, he has this advantage. He's got these beard clips that increase the damage of champions by 270%. He's got a couple of blue items, increases Dwarven Glory, increases the power of Rally, increases his ultimate attack, increases his ultimate attack cooldown. So he's got all these items that are all pretty powerful as well. So like you power up your items a lot by doing events, by doing time gates, because events and time gates give you chests. So like, for example, look at all these chests I have. I usually save up, I have 343 silver chests. I usually save up silver chests for events to open them during events. But yeah, we can open up a chest and we get some stuff. So we get this item. This is a duplicate item for Tyrell, so like instead of, it just powers up the item that he has a little bit already, because this like this gray vest is less powerful than his blue vest, but you still get a benefit for opening the chest, right? We get a little bit of gold, so I save the chests because those gold lets you push further in events when you have no favor, because you have no gold finds. So the chests are just kind of like a bonus source of gold that you can use strategically. And it's like, I know I've just been like rambling on and 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 on for like 50 minutes at this point about like all these overlapping mechanics and all this kind of stuff, and it doesn't make much sense until you've like played the game and seen how they all interact on their own. But it's just like there's so many layers and so many like interacting mechanics, and like there's just so much to this game, whereas like most idle games, you just kind of like do the thing that you do and that's the optimal solution, and that's like you just kind of set it and forget it. This game has so much depth of mechanics that it's like you're constantly reevaluating your strategies. Your strategies are going to be completely different from someone else because maybe you have different champions, maybe your gear has fallen in a different like array. Like if we look at Jamila, her items are all around level 20, level 30, and they're all blue. So like as a DPS, maybe she's not that great compared to Zorbu, who he's got an epic level 39 bow that increases his damage by 403, whereas Jamila only has these level 26 blue bangles that increase her damage by 220%. So that's a pretty big difference, right? So you have all these things that you have to consider. So like you can never really like take like one prescriptive path. You can't just read a strategy guide and be like, okay, this is, everyone do the same exact strategy, it's going to work for everyone. Everyone who plays this game has their own considerations that they have to take into account. So you're kind of forced to kind of like understand the mechanics of the game, understand how it works, and make decisions for yourself based on where your own standing is. And there's all these like different like, there's just so many ways to progress in this game that it's like insane. There's so many tasks to take on at any given time. You could say like, oh well, what do I want to do right now? What is my main goal right now? Well, if I look at my own account, I mean, this Avernus map is pretty bare. You know, I could be doing Avernus variants to unlock more stuff, to unlock more campaigns. I could be pushing to my wall in Avernus to try and get more favor, because that's the main way you unlock favor. Like, it doesn't matter how many missions and how many variants you completed. If you just go until the variant is done, you're not unlocking more favor, because you have to push to like as far as you possibly can to unlock more favor, basically. Like, I have E22 Tiamat favor, but the amount that I've earned by pushing to wave 8 is EO5. So basically 44,000 favor, which is absolutely nothing compared to one with 22 zeros after it, whatever that number is. I guess it would be sextillion, maybe? I don't know. Scientific notation is a lot easier for me to read, personally. But yeah, so like, those are like two separate goals. Either you're pushing deep to unlock more favor, you're pushing, but that takes a really long time to get to your wall, or you're pushing just far enough to complete variants to get more variants unlocked. You could say, I'm only pushing as far as I can do very quickly. So you can do stuff like, if I were to use all the speed champions, I can do stuff like, if I switch Shandy back in, she's kind of the main one. Unlevel her up to the point where she has her improved dash. And then I can put out a whole bunch of familiars so that they're constantly clicking. Put a familiar on click damage so that it's constantly upgrading my click damage. And then what we'll see when we this will be able to kill everything that comes in really quickly. So like, most of these guys are dying to click damage before my characters even have a chance to attack. In fact, if I open up this little debug menu, we can see killed by click damage, killed by click damage, killed by click damage. Everything's getting killed by click damage, right? So eventually you reach a point where you can't kill everything by click damage, and then things slow down. So maybe if you're just trying to farm gems, or if you're just trying to farm chests, maybe you don't push past the point where click damage stops killing stuff. Because every boss you kill every 5th wave gives you gems. Right now I have 7,000 gems. Gems are used to buy more familiars. Gems are also used to buy feats. Every character has 1 to 2 feat slots. You can choose what feats you give your characters. And some of the better feats, they cost gems to upgrade. So you can do stuff like, I can give Bruenor the Defensive Duelist, which gives him 5 more Overwhelm. So now he can handle, he can handle being attacked by 10 enemies at a time instead of 5. So maybe that makes him slightly better on the front row as a tank. That's not really where you typically would want to use Bruenor, but I mean, if you give him that feat, he can be a little bit flexible. So his feats to unlock, you can use, if you open up the shop, you can use, where would it even be? Chests. Okay, so chests. You can use gems to unlock, to buy silver and gold chests. So maybe you just want to farm gems. Maybe you just want to farm chests to increase your character's gear as much as possible. You even have stuff like this boss here. You can see his health looks a little bit different. He actually has armored health. So like, you have to be able to deal a certain amount of damage to deal one segment of his health bar. So being able to do like you can't one-shot this enemy, but you need to be able to do a minimum amount of damage to attack him. So even that introduces like interesting things where like different characters have different properties. So like Zorbu as a DPS, he does a lot of damage, but he just kind of like attacks in a straight line, and he attacks kind of slowly. Whereas like a character like Hitch, he attacks a little bit more quickly, but his daggers, he's already out. His daggers have a chance of ricocheting, and they can like ricochet onto the same enemy. So if you have an armored enemy, you can have something like Zorbu can attack him once and deal 1 segment of damage, but if Hitch has enough damage to actually like pierce his armor, he can hit the same enemy up to 5 times. So that can deal 5 segments of armored damage. So in that scenario, even though Zorbu does way more damage, maybe Hitch is a better DPS. So like, there's just so many things to think about. There's so many like different ways to progress. We haven't even looked at patrons. If we like complete this real quick, there's this little. Let's go back to Tomb of Annihilation, just because this is where I have the most favor, so it's the easiest area for me right now. There's this little menu here where we can choose different patrons. If we activate patrons, yes, we can activate Strahd as a patron. We can go here, just go to a normal free play. Normally free plays will have no restrictions on like special conditions or who you can use, but Strahd himself has a restriction of only champions with an int score of 13 or higher can be used. So Brunor can't be used, but I could use Turiel. Celeste can't be used, but I can use Regis. These guys are just going by unimpeded, so I'm going to have to wait for this to reset real quick. So we can do stuff like say, okay, well, can I not put them down? What's going on here? I'm a little confused what's going on here. We're just gonna take a second. Okay. Let's get some characters on the field just to like be able to actually like fight these level 1 like wave 1 enemies. Okay. Yeah, so there's certain characters that you can't use in when Strahd is your like active patron. Basically, you're like doing missions for Strahd is the narrative here. So that completely like reorganizes again who you can use. So maybe now it's like, okay, well, I'm limited in what tanks I can use because I can't use Nayeli. I can use Tyrell. So maybe I want to use Tyrell as a bear as my tank. Maybe I want to use like Nova as my tank. Nova's the newest champion in the game, and one of the biggest selling features of Nova is she's a tank that has enough intelligence to be used during Strahd Patrons. That's like one of her main selling points. You can even do stuff like, let's go back to, I guess I can't use the example I used before. That's a good one. So, well, this is basically the, okay. So this particular unearthed evil, oh wait, no, that is the patron restriction. That's a good one. Okay, so this one, the long haul. The normal, if we remove our patron, the normal requirement for the long haul is that only champions with 14 or more strength can be used. But if we also activate Strahd, and then look at this variant, we have both effects like overlapping. So now we can only use champions who have less than 14, or sorry, champions that have more than 14 strength and more than 13 int. So that's like double layers. So now it's like, oh, well, wow, the only champion in this slot that we can use is Krydel. So maybe Krydel is not that great, so maybe we don't use anyone from this slot. It's like, see, like there's like nobody we can use for this. Which is kind of like it's like a sign that like, okay, well, we can use Caddy Bree. So like, yeah, like who can we even use for this? So few characters. We can use Tyrell. So like, how do you even start to put together a formation for this kind of map, right? We can use Melf. So there's only 4 characters we can even use right now. So now, like, how do you even finish this kind of variant? A lot of it comes down to, like, you have to have very super precise strategies, you have to unlock a lot of favor, and you have to unlock a lot of champions so you have a lot of answers to a lot of different scenarios. So it's just super interesting. There's just so many things to do. There's these patrons. You wanna. Each patron comes with a list of challenges that you can do for them every week. Completing challenges gets you currency. You use that currency to unlock things in the patron shop. Completing variants gets you patron influence. You use that influence to purchase perks that function very similarly to favor and blessings. And it's man, there's zero chance that anyone has kept all of this in their head, but it's there's just so many things you can do. Like I was saying before, it's am I trying to complete more variants that I haven't unlocked? I haven't done any of these variants. There's are you completing the variants normally? Are you completing the variants with a patron unlocked? Because those are different things. We can see if we look at this one here, or what was it? This one? The long haul. There's no check mark because I haven't completed it with Strahd. But if I remove Strahd as my patron, it's yeah, I've completed it normally. I completed it with Mert the Moneylender as my patron, so I earned a bunch of influence with Mert for that. I completed it with I haven't completed it with Vajra as my patron. So it's are you completing things like vanilla? Are you completing things with patrons? Are you doing patron challenges? Are you trying to get patron influence? Are you doing the event right now? Are you doing the time gate? Are you earning favor with Sword Coast? Are you earning favor with Tomb of Annihilation? Are you earning favor with Waterdeep? Are you earning favor with Baldur's Gate? Do you want to earn favor with one before the other? When you complete a time gate or an event, you can convert the favor for that into favor for one of the campaigns. Do you want to increase your Sword Coast favor so that when you complete your campaign, you get a higher conversion rate from the event favor to the Sword Coast favor? Are you trying to do gem runs to unlock feats? Are you trying to get a lot of chests to increase your champion's equipment levels? Are you, maybe the event is currently active and you're trying to run the event a lot to because that's a good way of increasing the equipment for the event champions. Where'd it go? So these particular champions, next event is going to be a really good way to get gear for Deacon, Walnut, and whoever this champion is. Well, guess what? If we run whatever this is, I already have Deacon. I don't need I don't need to unlock Deacon in the next event, but because events are such a good way of getting equipment, it's going to be a good way for me to get equipment for Deacon, even though I already have him. So it's there's just so many avenues of progress that it's impossible to tackle all of them at the same time. So it's there's always something to do. Even though this is an idle game and you just kind of set it and forget it for a lot of the time, it's there's so many things to think about, so many things to consider, so many paths to walk, that there's always something to kind of satisfy your mind when you're looking at this game. There's just so many avenues. And this is all stuff that you can do completely free play. We've barely even looked at the shop. I mean, if we really want to, I personally think a lot of this stuff is kind of overpriced. But yeah, if you really want to say yeah, I really want to unlock Donar, then you can spend money, you can buy chests, you can do all this kind of stuff, but I've gotten almost 350 chests in 2 weeks, basically. Almost 2.5, I guess almost 3 weeks. But it's you have a pretty good pace even playing completely free, and in a lot of ways, I almost feel skipping over some of those progression paths by purchasing things, it almost feels like cheating. And even the that balance I feel is really good, because I feel compelled to play stuff free, to play to kind of unlock things naturally and kind of go through that process of doing things. Man, there's just so much to talk about this game. I think I finally exhausted pretty much all of it, for the most part. I guess there's even there's these weekend buffs that give particular buffs to specific characters, and there's just so much going on in this game, and it's just so fun. There's just, here, we can even do this. let me take a quick look at the subreddit real quick. So let me bring this tab over. Does this look okay? Yeah, it's okay. So there's this. This is like a specific filter on the Idle Champions subreddit, and it's like all of this stuff has happened since the last time I checked. So there was like a Twitch stream. I think this was from the Q&A. This was another D&D stream run by like someone who has like a tie-in with Idle Champions. A lot of these Twitch streams actually get their characters in the game. So for example, like Nova and Isla and Sentry and Quilek are all from what's it called? High Rollers? I don't know. One of these Twitch streams that is going on. But yeah, they're like constantly giving out free chests. So I can just say like, oh, I like this chest code. Bam, free gold chest. So I can upvote that. And just kind of do this with all of them, right? And like through this way, it's almost like you're able to unlock a whole bunch of chests. So those are some gold supply chests. So like this will give us a bunch of like potions and stuff. Because we have like all these potions that we can use to give us like extra effects, like and you can like stack potions, and like that's another layer of strategy. Yeah, it's like, so there's all of these like golden chests that you can unlock just by like paying attention to the community. You don't even have to pay attention to the community necessarily, but you can like just pay attention to this one subreddit and just like unlock all these gold chests for free just because like you paid attention to this page. And I guess what I'm trying to get at there is like it never really feels like I have any reason to buy things in this game because like so much is handed to me just for free. That was 2 gold chests just now. And so like this is, I think I did 4 or 5 codes. Another gold chest, so I just upvote all the ones that I've unlocked. So that was what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 5 gold chests for completely free over the span of I think 2 days. This was 2 days ago, was the oldest one that I just unlocked. And that's all completely for free, and this is just stuff that they do for the community because it's fun to do. I've got 39 gold chests that I just haven't opened because like you get so many of them just by doing it this way. So like I unlocked a neat a feat for Krull. I unlocked a bunch of gold, or not gold, epic level gear because I had so many gold chests. So like this is all stuff that I unlocked completely for free. Just like this is some shit, right? Like this is. I guess this all goes to say that like the economy of this game, it feels like, is very well balanced. Where like there's so much stuff you can buy if you really want, but like you kind of never really need to. The one I guess I would say exception is that familiars are usually a pretty good deal to pick up. You can see there's the Snowy Owlbear familiar for Red Nose Day. So familiars, you're a little bit limited on what familiars you can get from other avenues. But yeah, like this stuff is here if you need it, but you kind of just don't. Like, I don't know. This seems like a pretty reasonable deal, I guess. $10 to unlock a champion, the champion skin, 7 gold chests. A potion of polish is actually really good, and a free feat. Yeah, so like that's not even that bad a deal. $25 I would argue is way too much for that. And $20 for this plus a whole bunch of potions, that's an awful deal. But like, yeah, like some things are good deals, some things are not. But like, you never have to visit the shop if you don't want to. It's just like, yeah. You know, even stuff like this, like I have this this skin for Catti-brie, the winter Catti-brie skin, that they just gave this to everyone to celebrate the announcement of the Icewind Dale book. I think it's a book that they announced like a couple days ago. So now everyone who plays this game gets a free wintry Catti-brie skin. I've got, I guess on the same slot. I can't use them right now, but I've got Jim from Acquisitions Incorporated, the Penny Arcade D&D campaign, complete with Green Flame Jim. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm like super rambling at this point, but there's just so much to this game. There's so much to think about. Like, there's just a lot of really cool stuff, and there's even more coming. Like, soon enough, they're going to unlock. There's a feature they've been working called Modron Automation that lets you run multiple adventures simultaneously. So like, I spent all that time talking about how much stuff there is to do in this game, and how like beneficial it is to unlock like lots of champions, so you have lots of stuff. So now I could do something like, oh, like, let me put together, like, some bullshit formation. This is pretty trash. But let's see. Let's try and put this together into something not completely awful. So we could say maybe like this, maybe like this. I've got way too many tanks. We don't need a Tyrell tank. Tyrell, we can use Tyrell in his Moonbeam specialization. I guess we'd probably want to use Krydal DPS. So we probably want to do something like this. This is an awful formation, but we could do something like this if we really wanted to. And then, once Modron Automation comes out, we could say, like, oh, well, at the same time, while that's running, let's also go and do this other thing and use a completely different set of champions. So, like, you have this, like, that even starts to, like, break the meta a little bit. Because now you're not saying like, oh, well, everyone wants to use Zorbu because Zorbu is the best DPS in most situations. But Zorbu can only be in one adventure. So if you have like 2 or even 3 adventures running at the same time, like, yeah, maybe Jamila is a much more worthwhile DPS because you need a second good DPS and you need a third good DPS and maybe you need like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 good tanks. So like, this game is just like so cool and interesting, and there's just so much to it, and it's only going to get better. Like, there's only going to be more D&D tie-ins as new books get unleashed, as new Twitch streams continue to push on. Like, they recently did an interesting thing. I was talking before about the High Rollers characters. They all have this thing called Erois Synergy. So if I look at Isla, I don't even know what Erois Synergy is within the context of like the D&D adventure that these characters come from. But can I not unlock it yet? Let's look at Quilek. Oh, I can't even use Quilek. Whatever. Erois Synergy is basically like just another affiliation buff, like the Hall's Champions of the Hall that I was saying. Looking at before with like Brunor, Dritz, Catti-brie, Regis, Wolfgar. This is kind of like the same idea where like it's just this pool of champions who all buff each other. But Nova doesn't even know Erois Synergy yet. Like, that's an ability that she's going to learn later because her character in the D&D Twitch stream does not, like, I guess she doesn't know it yet. So like, this character is going to get better in a future patch because the plot in a D&D campaign is going to get further and the character in the D&D campaign is going to get more powerful. Like, oh my god, there's just... Oh, it's so cool. This game has so much going for it, and it does all of the things that I always wished there was an idle game that it did like more interesting things, and this game just does all of them. I know I've been like even this like final like summation of my thoughts. Even this has been rambling, but like there's just so much to love here. So like, if any of what I've been saying has been like has rung true, has like interested you even a little bit, like I would say give this game a shot. Give it a little bit of time because like it is going to be kind of boring to begin with, but if you give it like a couple of weeks, like you don't even have to play it that actively. It's an idle game. It's designed to be kind of left to the side here. Like this whole time I've been playing, I haven't accomplished anything. I've just been restarting over and over and over and over again to demonstrate things. But like I haven't been doing anything for most of the time. So like yeah, you're spending all of your time just kind of like setting it up, letting it go, and just kind of like being thoughtful about like your formation, being thoughtful about what your high level goals are, what things you're specifically trying to make progress for, and also even just stuff like how are you using your familiars. Like if I wanted to leave this idle, I would probably want something like, okay, so I want something like this. I want to have these two familiars out because they're automatically clicking for me, so they're doing damage to enemies. I want one on here. This is upgrading my click damage so that my click damage is increasing as I go. So I should be able to get like hundreds of waves into this adventure with clicks clearing everything for me. I could say put a familiar on Krydle because Krydle is in theory my DPS character in this formation, so I want to continually upgrade his DPS so he can continue to be a strong DPS. And I can put one on here, and this little hamster is gonna run around and automatically start using my ultimate attacks, which we haven't even looked at yet, but like every character in this game has an ultimate attack. So I can like hit this attack with Nova, and you can see it's gonna do like, oh man, look at these waves. They just hit everything and like kill everything. And now it's on cooldown for 3 minutes. So this little boy is gonna like run back and forth and use these ultimates like automatically for me. So I can set this up. I can use my familiars to say like this is what I want my formation to do passively without me interacting with it. And I can just leave it, and it'll probably clear up to like wave 300 or 350 or something, without me having to interact with it at all. So like this game, like there's a lot of stuff to it, but you can just jump in. You can like your experience is going to be different from everyone else's. You can just kind of like learn at your own pace, figure things out, figure out what works for you, kind of like gradually like look at the community, see what people are saying, see what chests people are getting for free with chest codes. Somewhere out there's like a giant dump. Actually, let's see if I can find it. Idle Champions chest codes. I think. Is this it immediately? Yeah, I think so. So there's this wiki page with like these are all free chests that you can just unlock immediately. Like every single one of these, you can just get immediately as soon as you start the game. There's got to be like probably upwards of like 100 or so chests, I guess. I don't know. I could talk about this game forever, and I've been talking about this game forever, so I'm gonna stop now. But like, I love this game so much. I've been super hooked on it for months. Like with all the stuff going on in the world right now, like you know I'm working from home right now, so like I'm constantly sitting at my computer, and this game is just always running, and like having this thing in the back of my constantly going in the back of my mind with like constantly thinking about like, okay, what is the best thing for me to be spending my time on progressing right now? Okay, like I know that like the next event is starting in 2 days, the next time gate is starting in like a week. Like what do I want to do now? What do I want to do later? What's the best use of my time? Do I want to push to my wall right now because I've got the weekend buffs? Like do I want to specifically like gear up this one character so I can start using them? Because so that like, oh, like maybe I want to gear up Regis specifically because he's really good. He kind of does the same thing as Celeste. My Celeste has really good gear. My Regis doesn't have good gear, so maybe I want to like gear up Regis specifically so that because at some point he's going to become stronger than Celeste, so he's like a better long-term investment. Like there's just so many things that I'm constantly thinking about, and it's just really saved me like throughout all this stuff with like the the virus and everything else going on. It's like having this thing in the back of my mind is like a constant thing that I can think about, and I'm constantly pushing towards new goals, and like there's just so many things. This game has saved me so much, and like I love it so much. It's so exactly what I want an idle game to be, and it's even made me like more interested in D&D. Like I in my most recent D&D campaign that I started, I chose a Warforged bard, partly because I thought Sentry, who is a Warforged, is like such a cool looking character. Warforged are cool, so I made a Warforged character. I'd never made a Warforged character before. You know, I'd always been kind of like tangentially aware of who Dritz is, but then I like unlocked him in the game, and then, like he had his own cool like variant missions where he's like the star of the show, and that was cool. And it's like, hey, like a few weeks later, all like 30 or 40 or whatever Dritz books went up on Humble Bundle for like $5. So I was like, yeah, I'll buy all the Dritz books for $5. I know who he is now. Like, this game is even like broadened and like made me more appreciative as like D&D itself. This game has done so much for me, and I hope you appreciate it as well. And if you have like a fraction the amount of interest in this game, if this game does like a fraction of the amount for you as it does for me, then like you're gonna love it. So if you've actually watched this video until the end, mad respect to you. I don't know why you would do that to yourself, but I love this game a lot. I've really enjoyed talking about it a lot. I hope you have enjoyed listening to it, to me talk about it a lot, and I hope you enjoy it too. Because in the end of the day, that's kind of what I'm hoping to achieve with this video, is I want more people to play this game. Because it really has a lot to offer. It's in a category of games that is very serially like underappreciated. And I think this is like the standout idle game that really proves that like just because a game is an idle game doesn't mean it has anything to offer. So, yeah. This is like the 19th time I said I'm going to stop talking, but this is actually the end. So, I don't know what my next video is going to be, but I felt compelled to make this like little one-off, and that's that. So, I will catch you later.